going to be covering, first of all, some of the basics of reading rhythms. And then we're going to talk about how those apply to lyrics, or take some lyrics and apply rhythms to them and just see what we can do with those. I had something that I'd like you to listen to first. So this guy is talking about this particular kind of rhythm.
This rhythm is called Tracio. You may not have heard that name before, but you've definitely heard this rhythm before.
Come on, turn the radio on. It's Friday night and I won't be long. Gotta
I won't lie to you. I know he's
pictures, so I hardly ever took him. Got the same from my night from the bedroom.
Right. So that's just an example of, and it goes on with, dozens and dozens of pop tunes that all use the same rhythm. So we're going to talk about how to interpret those. And then later on, I'm going to give you a site that you can go to practice looking at rhythms and seeing how they apply to different pop songs. Over there, that's treble clef. And this little item here is a rest. And these are bars. What these markate is lengths of time. How long they are is arbitrary. The important thing is that all of them are equal unless they're otherwise indicated by some kind of increasing tempo, which I will explain in a bit. And once you have a basic length of time, the idea is that you can divide it up in a variety of ways. You can cut it in half, you can cut it in thirds or quarters or 5 parts or 6 parts or whatever. Each of those has a way of being represented, right? So the basic and thing you're going to run across in pop music most of the time, and I would guess that most of the songs you're ever going to write are going to look a bit like this. They will have 4 of these things. These are quarter note rests, right? And if you replace the rest with a note, that's a quarter note, right? If you have 4 of them, then you have filled up your bar. And it sounds like this. And then you have divided this bar into 4 parts. If you want a note that lasts for as long as 2 of these, you change that into a half note. And then it sounds like this. If you want a note that lasts for the full bar, you'll turn it into a whole note. And then it sounds like this. Let's say you want something that lasts for 3 of those quarter notes. And instead of, it's somewhere in between a half note and a whole note, right? So what you do is you make a half note and then you put a little dot after it. And you'll see that the remaining amount of time is taken up by the missing quarter note, right? And that's going to sound almost like a whole note because you don't hear the silence, of course, because it's silent. Right. However, if we took this same bar and we said, I want to start counting here, a quarter note rest, and make a half note there. Whoops. And so that's going to look like that. We're still counting this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I wanted 2 of these, I would just make another one here. And that sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, this is all super basic math. And to represent it, what we're going to do is put a time signature at the beginning, and that's going to be called 4/4. What that means is that each of these is a quarter note, and there's 4 of them in a bar. that's true even if the only thing in the bar is a whole note rest. By the way, you notice that a whole note rest, I'm going to show you the different rests, by the way. A whole note rest hangs underneath the line. A half note rest sits on top of the line. The quarter note rest looks like a chair that somebody's in the process of knocking over. And they get smaller. You can have quarter note rests or 16th note rests, 32nd note rests, and they just get hairier and hairier, right? And so we're going to talk about how to subdivide those. The point is that all of them are going to add up to 4 quarter notes. But that's not the only species of bar there is. For example, if I change to the time signature to, then this time, if I try to fill up this bar, I only have 3 quarter notes. Right, perfectly logical. And so it only stands to reason that if I change this to 7/4, I can fill that up with 7 quarter notes. Right. But now what's going to happen? I showed you what happens if I want a note that is worth 2 of these. What if I want a note that is worth half of one of those? Then it's called an 8th note, and 2 of them occupy the same amount of time as that, right? And that's going to sound like, right, these are twice as fast. If I fill up the bar with 8 notes, I can get 6 of them in there. If I want half as long again, I just turn those into 16th notes. And I want you to notice, even though I now have 12 notes in this bar, I still only have 3 groups. And this is called beat beaming. So they're beamed together with these things at the top to show that they're all part of a single beat, right? And that's going to sound like, right? But you're still going to count it 1, 2, 3. So the basic underlying pulse stays the same. And so, of course, you can have any combination of the above. You notice this kind of defeats the beat beaming, because this one actually is longer than the 8th note that fills out the rest of this beat, and it goes into the next beat. So, and we have a way of showing that. I actually want that to be an 8th note. So there's that, and there's that, and I want to add those 2 together. And what I do is do that with the tie. So that the tie is basically just adding the values of 2 different notes together. So this is going to sound like this. So let's just make a couple of those and see what 2 of them sounds like. Right? So you can hear that it's ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And emphasis is always at the beginning of the bar, which is why you know where the emphasis actually is, and that it is the beginning of the bar. So I would be counting it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Of course, Sibelius doesn't actually play that emphasis. We just know that it's there. If I just turn that into an 8th note, then it's going to sound a lot simpler. But you can still see every time I click one of those and turn it into an 8th note, there are fewer notes. But the bar, the tie between the bars, the note, right, still applies. I can even, if I want, tie that over the bar like this. Tying these over the bar, right? So we're adding up the values now. And let's listen to this. Da 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 da. Now, just for the sake of argument, let's say I have this rhythm that goes da 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 da, and somebody hands that to you and says, "Would you write some words to this?" So I want people to throw me out some words, just like any old random words.
Rescue.
Rescue. Let's take misery. Popcorn. You know, this is something Paul McCartney used to do when he'd write a new song, and he would just throw in nonsense words to match the rhythms. When we did the first class, we talked about lyrics and the natural rhythms of lyrics. But give me two more words.
Station.
Station. And I'm going to throw in the word and. Rescue, misery, popcorn, station, and. Let's look at the rhythms of these words. Like, how would you say the first word? Rescue, right? So the emphasis is on the first beat, and it's really strong. So I could immediately imagine putting that there. Rescue. And then there's nothing underneath that note because it's tied to the one before it, right? So it's actually really just an extension of that note. And then so we have rescue, but da 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 da. I need something. We don't have a word that sounds like but da da. So let's stick the and there. Rescue and now we have choice. We could say misery, or we could say popcorn.
Misery.
Misery. All right. Well, you don't like popcorn? And this one's tied to the one before it. Misery. And now we got the word popcorn and station. And we only have 3 notes to fit them in. How about we turn this into 2 16th notes? Now we have 4 notes. But popcorn takes way longer to say than station. So we're going to put station in the 16th notes. Like you could say popcorn station. It's way more fun to say station popcorn, right? And that's one of the things that we were talking about in the first class, about how even words with the same number of syllables, some are shorter and some are longer. Like saying station popcorn is possible, but saying popcorn station is too weird. It just like really doesn't fit. So we're going to say station popcorn, rescue and misery, station popcorn, rescue and misery, station popcorn. It's brilliant. It's a towering masterwork. Congratulations, you have written a song. But more properly speaking, this particular assemblage of rhythms, which we concocted, is something that would occur again and again in a song, even as a bass line or as a little form of melody. And if we were going to turn this into a melody, for example, a general principle I like to use is that the melody should follow the sound of the word. For example, when you say rescue, you don't say rescue, right? The first syllable is usually higher than the second one. So it makes sense that the first note will be higher. So let's try it. And so let's just try saying rescue and misery, station popcorn. So here's what I noticed in popcorn. That note is popcorn is higher. Rescue and misery, and you notice the and was even lower than the Q, and the mi went up again. So we have rescue and misery, station popcorn, and it actually sounds kind of melodic. It's sort of magical that way. Now, Varouche gave us some, he sent me some lyrics last week. I asked him whether he would mind if I used some of them. Right. Let's try Walk Through the Forest. We're starting from the other end. And this is, again, you know, you have two choices in writing a song. You can start from the music and add words, or you can start from the words and add music, obviously. Or you can do somehow like magically both. And so we have this line, walked through the forest. So I want everyone to take a crack at just saying that. Keiko, you first. You just say that line for me.
Walk through the forest.
Walk through the forest. Right. So what would you say about that? The first, what was the first strong word?
Walk.
Walked. Yeah. And then through was longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Baruch, try saying it.
Walk through the forest.
Walk through the forest. Did you
Yeah.
mean to hesitate after the word the?
Yeah, there was a bit of
Okay. Walk through the forest.
forest. It's a bit
I like that.
bumpy,
Now-
a little bumpy. Yeah.
I just want to notate those two different things. So what Keiko said was, it sounded like walk through the forest. And that sounded kind of like this. Through the forest. So let's put those words underneath. Walk through the forest. And whereas Baruch, okay, so but say it one more time.
Walk through the forest.
You notice how the was really short? This is what it sounded like to me. That sounds like this. Walk through the forest. That's a very different feeling, right? Keiko says, walk through the forest. And yours is, walk through the forest. It's like you're doing a completely different activity. So let's talk about this dotted thing, because it's an important part of rhythm as well. So we have our quarter note, like that. All right. And then we have a half note, right? The half note is worth 2 quarter notes. The quarter note is worth 2 eighth notes. But if I want something that's worth 3 eighth notes, right? The half note is worth 4 eighth notes. Quarter note's worth 2. If I want something that's worth 3 eighth notes, I have to have this dot at the end. And that means it's going to, the extra eighth note in that whole half note there is going to show up as a rest unless I put a note there, and that's going to be an eighth note, right? And that'll sound like, I'm going to show you how you count these. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to split it up so that in between, that's going to have a plus sign. And that plus sign goes right over the eighth note because that's where it falls, right? So now we count it 1 and 2, and this happens on the and of 2, right? So it's 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1, and then you can put the ands between the 3 and 4, but there are no notes, so we don't even have to worry about them. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, right? And that applies to every little version of that. If we start breaking these down into smaller and smaller units, in between the 1 and the and, you can put an E and then ah, E and ah. To count that, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So here we have something that's worth 3 16th notes. And that's shown by, here's a 16th note rest, right? Which looks exactly like through the, right? There. The and should be right over the 8th note. And what does that sound like? Guess what that sounded like? Da, 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 da. That sounded like that Tracio rhythm that we listened to at the beginning. If you count up the numbers of 16th notes here, we have 1, and this is worth 2. So that, let's represent that with a note. And we're going to tie those together. copy that whole thing, guess what it sounds like? That's the Tracio rhythm. Look. So we have 3 16th notes, 3 16th notes, and 2 16th notes. And the way they wrote it was instead of writing this here tied to that there, they just wrote another dotted. Right. And so that's how they got to that rhythm, which is everywhere, I gotta say. I think the first pop song I remember hearing that in was this egregious tune called Isla Mujeres. Isla Mujeres. I thought I should also mention that you can take a rhythm like that and also break it into 3. And you do that by making a triplet. And that looks like this. Right? But again, those 3 notes are the length of one of those. So that's 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and 4 quarters. So let's say we fill the rest up with quarter notes. It sounds like ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, da-da. And here's an interesting thing. If you take that same rhythm, could somebody else suggest a different line?
Vanessa Carlton's "A Thousand Miles Hard That Way." Making my way downtown.
Take them away downtown. That's perfect. Now, notice we're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Take them away downtown. Take them away downtown. You probably want the strong beat to be on the way in a way, right? So it's going to probably look more like this, as in take them away downtown, take them away downtown, right? It's an entirely different feeling. And interesting, like if we take that and just try moving it over like this, again, we have a different feeling, as in 1, 2, take them away downtown, take them away downtown. It would be more likely if you had a friend named Downtown, then you would be saying, take them away downtown. But there's something about the fact that that word happens at the beginning of the bar that makes you want to influence the meaning of it, even because it's such a strong emphasis, right? That it just saying downtown and take them away downtown, take them away downtown. Unless, of course, you're making a whole song about downtown like Petula Clark. There'd have to be some reason rhythmically why you would want to do that. Those characteristics of the words actually affect your rhythmic choices. We were going back here to walk through the forest. Say that word line for me.
Walk through the forest.
Walk through the forest. Nice. Okay, so this is what that sounds like to me. Walk through it sounds like a triplet. So I'm going to write that. The triplet lasts 1 quarter note. So I'm going to make it triplet 8ths. And followed by quarter notes. So it's 1, 2, 3. Walk through the forest. Walk through the forest. You know what? If it's going to be like that, I think you should take the ed off the end because you don't really have time to pronounce it. Walk through the forest. Does that make sense to you, Sebastian?
Yes. The forest rest was a little shorter.
Oh,
Walk through the forest.
the interesting thing is this. Okay, so here's what we would do. I believe that forest, unless we know what comes afterwards, we don't know that this isn't actually occupying the same amount of time as that. But we know that this fills up that whole beat. And maybe it stops after that. So we're not saying walk through the forest. We're going walk through the forest. Walk through the forest, right? So it's shorter than a quarter note. So good call. Alan Davison, how about you?
Walk through the forest.
Walk through the forest. It's fascinating that there's so many ways to sing that, eh? Okay, so that's This is what that sounds like to me. Let's dot at 8 and 16, and it forest. It sounded like this to me. So let's put that in, and then we'll say it. Walk through the forest. Walk through the forest. Okay, so this is just by way of showing that when you have a written line like that, walk through the forest or walked through the forest, it's important to say it as many different ways as you can, to think about the possible rhythms that could go along with it. Because those rhythms have a lot to say about the nature of the song you want to do. The rhythm, for example, that Keiko suggested was very lyrical and gentle. Walk through the forest. Walk. And then we had walk through the forest, which I think was Baruch's. And then Sebastian had walk through the forest, walk through the forest. And then Alan had something a little bit like Baruch's, but a little different. Walk through the forest. The difference between this one and that one is this one sounds a little more cheerful to me. Walk through the forest, as opposed to walk through the forest. That sounds a bit more march-like, right? And all you're doing is just changing one tiny little rhythm, and you're actually creating a different musical experience. That's just an example of how profound rhythm can be, and how important it is to try saying things different ways. So now I want to talk about other time signatures. So what are our alternatives here? This is our little time signature. This program, by the way, is called Sibelius. It's fairly sophisticated. And let's look at some of these. So we could have 3/4, right? We can have 2/4. Let's say what 2/4 looks like. So that's again, it's going to default to creating the quarter notes, right? So we have 2 quarter notes per bar. And really, what's the difference between 1 bar of 4/4? So if I were going to make words to this, I would want a strong emphasis here as well as there. So I want to say something like silent darling. Whereas if I were going to make a bar of 4/4 with those same 2 words, I would think of it more like I would take the comma out, and I'd think more like silent darling. There's a strong emphasis at the beginning of the bar. How about, well, 2/2 is 2 half notes. 4/4 is so common that it actually has a little symbol. This is standard 4/4, and this is called cut time, which is almost like 2 bars of 2/4. But we don't have to worry too much about that. 3/2 is like 3/4, pretty much, except that you're using half notes instead of quarter notes. And the same with 3/8 notes. So this is half notes, this is quarter notes, this is 3/8 notes. If we make this 3/8 and I play a note, the next note I play has to be an 8th note, right? I can fit 3/8 notes in there, but I can't fit 4. If I make a half note, I want that to be a half note now. It won't do it, darn. Because a half note is actually worth 4 8th notes. So it just resents being pushed around like that. Now let's look at some really odd time signatures, like, for example, 7/8. Listen to this.
Who'll be my love? You'll be my love. You'll be my sky above. Who'll be my light?
Okay, so what's going on here? He's counting, well, 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2, right? This is a rhythm that you'll frequently hear in Greek music, which is, of course, why you have bouzouki in the background. Another way that a rhythm that fast is counted is 1 and a 2 and 1 and a 2 and 1 and a 2 and any way that you can represent it so that it makes sense. Let's say if we were going to write some lyrics to a 7/8 rhythm, we have Cat Stevens' version of Ruby My Love, and that's Ruby My Love, you'll be my love, right? And that's, we broke that down like this. We had a dotted quarter rhythm, 2 regular quarter rhythms. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Right now I've got to fill that up. It beams them very nicely and obediently together. If I were going to write that down, it would be like this. That's Ruby, my love. Ruby, my love. You'll be my love. Right. You'll mostly hear rhythms like that in Eastern European music from different cultures, but there are Western songs that use it as well. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 5. Right. And you're probably hearing my voice coming in late because I'm trying to talk along with something on Zoom. But you can see it has 7 beats in it. Would anybody care to suggest some words that could fit into 7/8, just for the heck of it?
How about Mac the Knife? Like, I don't know the words of Mac the Knife, but it's kind of an interesting rhythm. Da, 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 da.
Dum, dum, da, dum. Dum, dum, da, dum. Da, da, dum. Right? What would you say is the strongest pulse in that each of those lines? Da, 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 da. That's louder than the others, isn't it? But so let's make it so that the third note happens at the beginning of the next bar, and the first 2 notes are what we call a pickup. They happen before the bar. Let's make these quarter notes. The next note, ba da 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 da. That's one of those dotted rhythms. It seems to me like maybe tied to an 8th note afterwards. So this is an interesting thing to note. The time signature of all of these bars is now 3/8 because 3/8 was the last time we changed the time signature. So in order to make a new time signature, we have to choose it and put it where we want it to be. Start again. Make that into 2 quarter notes. Give me a line from Mac the Knife. Someone's creeping, right?
Someone's coming. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Someone's coming. And now here's an interesting thing about that. You notice that rhythmic line is repeated 3 times. Although the words are different, so we're going to choose the words, select the words, and get rid of them. All the words, so we're just going to make them up like. All right, so we've repeated that 3 times, and then we have a different rhythm here, and it's like pearly white, which to me sounds like this. It sounds like this. Someone's coming down the hallway, and his teeth are pearly white.
Yeah.
Right. So you've taken a a little rhythmic phrase, just like a melodic phrase, and repeated it over and over, and that gives a shape to a whole message. When writing a song, how do you determine which time signature is the best choice for your song? That's a really good question. Well, let's just grab some lyrics from somewhere, see what we come up with. I want everyone to say that to yourself. You probably, I'm sure most of you know this song, and the way she sings it, I go walking after midnight out in the moonlight, right? And so underlying that, there's this pulse. I go walking 2, 3 after midnight, 2, 3 out in the moonlight, just like we used to do, right? So there's another example of somebody taking the same kind of rhythmic structure, repeating it 3 times, and then capping it off with a different rhythm to make a whole rhythmic phrase, right? So the 3 in 1, it happens a lot. However, there's nothing to say that this has to be like that. Let's say if we were going to make it a waltz, but we're instead of 4, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Would anyone venture to take a stab at saying these words in 3 instead of 4?
Say 1, 2, 3. Okay, I go out walking in the midnight. You got to be rush the words, right?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, how about if you put the I at the beginning of the bar, like I go out walking after midnight, out in the moonlight, just like we used to do. Right. So
You're right.
obviously you have to do something different with this line. Out in the moonlight, just like we used to do, or something like that. I'm always walking after midnight, searching for you. I could easily imagine those lyrics in 3. So what's the appropriate time signature? Some lyrics are going to make it really obvious. Let's see if we can find some that would be super obvious. Now, could you imagine that as a waltz? Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River. Yeah, you could do that as a waltz.
Works, yeah.
Yeah. This would be pretty obvious. Yeah. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. There's no way you could do that as a waltz. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. I guess you could do it, but really, it sounds better like deck the halls with boughs of holly. And that's because it has these recurring strong beats kind of stuck all the way through it. So if I had to answer that question in a general sense, I'd say the internal rhythms of the line you listen to and see if they can fit into a 3, and if not, can they fit into 4? And then, if you're adventurous, can they fit into 5? Can they fit into 7? And there are lots of songs that are really obviously in 3, like oh, MacDonald is dead and his brother don't know it, his brother is dead and MacDonald don't know it, they're both of them dead and they're in the same bed, neither one knows that the other is dead, right? This is another interesting thing to note. What Cohen does in a case like that is he leaves lots of space between the lines. This is an interesting song. Cohen wrote it in 3, but Jennifer Warren's recorded it in 4.
The bird on the wire, like a drunk in a midnight choir. I have tried in my way to be free.
Right. So let's go back and look at that. So we have like a bird, pause, on the wire, right? So the bird and the wire are obviously the points of greatest emphasis, they're going to end up at the beginning of the bar. And the words before them are what we call the pickup, right? They set up that strong rhythm on the downbeat.
Like a drunk in a
Right?
midnight choir.
Choir,
I have
tried,
in my
way,
to be free.
free. Really looking at the strong words in each of the lines, you can almost like go back and isolate them. Bird, wire, drunk, choir. Notice the wire and choir, and tried, way, and free. You can almost get the entire intent of the song from those words. Let's see what Jennifer Warnes had to do with that. By the way, you notice that rhythm? That's that Tracio rhythm I was telling you about. That's fascinating, eh? It's everywhere.
Like a bird on a wire, like a drunk in a midnight choir. I have tried in my way to be free. Like a fish.
So there you go. It's two really well-known examples of the same song done to a different rhythm. So there's nothing that says you're totally stuck with doing a song in any particular rhythm. If you write for a particular rhythm, then you really want to emphasize that. But you can take something that you wrote without thinking about a rhythm and apply different rhythms to it and just see how it feels. And any parting observations, questions?
Well, I actually have a rhythm I've been playing with, but I don't know how to write it down.
Oh,
And
play
it doesn't
it
have
for me.
words yet.
Yeah.
But it's like a da 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 da. How would I write that down?
So the way you think of it is, see if you can find the underlying pulse to it, like so da 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 da, right? Tap along with it. Da 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 da. When does it repeat? Da 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 da. Repeats after 3 beats, right? And we have a strong beat at the beginning. Da 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 da, right?
Da 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 da.
Oh, da 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 da. That's different. But it's still in 3.
Yeah. Okay.
Da 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 da. Right. So again under that I'd go da 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 da. That's you can write that as let's say 6/8 because it's 2 groups of 3.
Yeah.
Talking about compound time. And this is what it would look like to me. That looks like this. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I have one more link to throw at you guys. All right. So thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Bye.
Bye.